All right, folks, have a good one. Take care.
Okay, Chair, we are now live.
Okay,
From what I
thank
can
you.
see.
Welcome, councillors, to this live stream meeting of the Customer Service and Transformation Scrutiny Committee at Bolsover District Council. This is a public meeting being streamed live to YouTube and via the council's website. If for any reason the public can no longer hear or see the meeting over the live stream, we will adjourn the meeting until the connection has been re-established. This meeting is also being recorded. Can the facilitator confirm who is in remote attendance at this meeting, please? Over to you, Tom.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just do a roll call of the members who are, first of all, the members who are on this committee who are attending remotely. I'll go down the list of people who are in attendance remotely, and could each member please state their title, the ward they represent, and confirm that you can see and hear me as well, please. Thank you. First of all, Councillor Paul Cooper.
Yes, Councillor Paul Cooper here. Sorry, what else do you want?
The ward you represent, Councillor Cooper, and if you can hear me and see me.
Yes, the Northern Ward, North Bolsover Ward.
Can you see and hear me, Councillor Cooper?
I can, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Rose Bowler.
Councillor Rose Bowler, Bolsover South Ward. Yes, can hear you, Tom.
Councillor Anne Clark.
Councillor Anne Clark, Bolsover East Ward, and yes, I can hear and see everybody.
Councillor Jane Bryson.
Good morning, Councillor Jane Bryson, South Dormington West Ward. Yes, I can hear and see everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Rita Turner.
Councillor Rita Turner, representing Elmpton, Cresswell and Hodthorpe. Yes, I can hear you and see you all.
Councillor David Dixon.
Councillor David Dixon, Barbara Ward. Yes, I can see everybody. Well, actually, I can't see Councillor Bailey, but I can hear everybody else and see everybody else.
Councillor Tricia Clough.
Councillor Tricia Clough, Althocknell Ward. Yes, I can see and hear everybody except for Councillor Bailey. Can't see Councillor Bailey.
In terms of councillors, we're in the councillors' chamber. We also have Councillor Ray Heffer, Councillor Andrew Josbury, and portfolio holder Mary Dooley. The officers in attendance are Anne Bedford, complaints officer, Joe Wilson, scrutiny and elections officer, Tom Scott, governance officer, Alison Bluff, governance officer, and Liz Robinson, accountant's assistant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. I will now ask the facilitator to explain some of the procedures for the meeting. Over to you, Tom.
Before we start the meeting, members are reminded of the meeting etiquette that has been circulated to them. All members should have their microphones turned off during the meeting unless you wish to speak and you've been called on. Members attending remote, please leave your cameras on during the meeting. Also, for remote members, to request to speak, please use the chat function to type speak or raise your hand on camera. The chair will then call on you to speak during the discussion debate. When a vote is to be taken, this will be by a show of hands. For those attending remotely, please ensure your hand is visible on camera. If any member is disconnected from the meeting, please try to rejoin as quickly as possible. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact one of the support officers assigned to this meeting in the email I sent to you. If you were about to speak, the meeting will wait a few moments for you to join. Chair, I will now hand back to you to start the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I will now begin the agenda. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Could the clerk confirm if we have received any apologies for today, please?
No apologies received, Chair.
Thank you. Do members have any other apologies to note? No. Right, thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 2. I've not been advised of any urgent items for today's meeting. So we'll move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest members wish to make? Could I ask the facilitator to confirm any members wishing to speak, please?
No.
Nobody's got their hand raised, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. So if we move on to agenda item 4 then, minutes of the meeting. Within the agenda pack, starting on page 4, we have the minutes from the 3rd of August for approval. I'd like to move these as a true and accurate record of the meeting. Could I have a seconder, please?
Second them, Rita Turner.
Thank you, Rita. All those in favour, would you raise your hands, please?
I'm sorry, I put my hand up.
Could I ask the facilitator to confirm who is in favour?
That's everybody apart from Councillor Anne Clark, Chair, remotely.
Right, thank you.
Can I ask why we can't see Councillor Bailey?
It's not there.
I was voting.
Councillor Clough, you wish to speak?
Yes, I didn't vote then because I wasn't at the meeting last time. So I can't vote on the minutes, and I believe Councillor Anne Clark is in the same position.
Yeah,
Yes, I was going to
correct.
say the same. I couldn't vote.
Yes,
I
thank you
wasn't
very
there.
much. So that's everybody in favour then, is it?
Sorry, Chair. What was the voting from Councillor Bailey? Why can't we see Councillor Bailey's vote?
Do we have an answer to that?
He's not at meeting and not send any apologies.
I think Councillor Bailey's having some technical issues which we're trying to sort out, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we carry on then. Right, agenda item 5 then, list of key decisions. The link to the most current version can be found on page 9 of the agenda pack. Could I ask the scrutiny officer to brief members on the report, please? Over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a range of reports in the current list of key decisions that will be considered by exec at the end of this month, and also towards the end of the paper, a couple of items that will be considered in October. I don't believe there are anything that directly relates to the committee per se in terms of the main list of key decisions. Obviously, if there's anything that you've got specific questions on at this stage, there's still time to actually speak to the key officers and the portfolio holders for those items. I'm happy to try and answer specific questions that members have on the items in question, and they start on page 4 of the list of key decisions. Have members had chance to look at the papers online? Because I think you've had the link in your papers, haven't you? Do you want me to just read out the main items that are in the paper?
Yes, please, Joe.
Yeah. So there will be an item on insurance policies renewal. That actually looks like it will be a delegated decision by the head of finance and resources, and the decision's due not before 17th of September, but that is a key decision. There's an item around provision of positive input ventilation systems. So this is a system that we use within our council properties, links within to the loft, and it's about circulation within the property to help relieve damp from condensation, etc. That's a key decision. There's an item around the purchase of a particular software module for an existing system the council has, the IDOC system, which is a document management system. The purchasing of that module will just allow us to bring things more in line for property services currently, where things need to sort of be refined in terms of how they're managing their documents currently. There's an item around selling services. This is a result of some work that came from a review by Growth, where we were looking at how we could promote what is available in terms of service delivery, external for income generation. That's actually not a key decision. There's an item around the future of the Cresswell Station building, demolition of flats at High Street and Tibshelf, which the local ward members are aware of. Purchase of Section 106 properties at a site within Cresswell off Skinner Street. Sale of land at Shirebrook. The establishment of an economic loan fund. A proposed structure of a planning policy team. The environmental health service review, which you are aware of as a committee from previous work that we've been doing, looking at the environmental health service. So this is the next stage in that review process. I'm hoping that we'll get some more further detail from the service officers in that area later on in the year. I believe we've scheduled it at the minute for November meeting, when hopefully they'll be able to come back and update properly in relation to our review of that area. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Jo. Does any member have any questions or observations? No? I would like to move that we note the report. Can I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Taylor, second it.
Thank you. Are all members agreed? Okay, is that everybody, Tom?
That's everybody, Chair.
Thank you. Right then, we'll move on to agenda item 6, customer service standards, compliments, comments and complaints report 2019-20. We will now consider the performance report covering Q3 and Q4 October to March and the annual summary. We have the customer standards and complaints officer joining us today to present the report. Anne, would you like to begin, please?
Yes, good morning, everybody. As you'll note, this is one of the biannual reports that I present to Scrutiny. This is the Q3, as Councillor Bowler said, Q3 and Q4, an annual summary. It is to provide information on the Council's performance in relation to its customer service standards and also the complaints system. It is to look at how effective we're performing against it. So it's just an information report. So I'll just briefly go through it. As we all know, we've had quite a difficult last 6 months with COVID-19. So there has been a slight impact on some of the performance. So if we just pop through, I'll just walk you through the report. We've got a target of 93% for answering the telephones. Cumulatively over 2019-20, we have achieved 98%. In the last 2 quarters, we only had a couple of departments not hitting that target. And obviously there's been things that come into play through COVID regarding that. So housing and community safety and planning didn't hit the target. Contact centres, 80% of incoming calls to be answered within 20 seconds. Cumulatively over the year, it was 78%. So that only just fell short of the target of 80%. Revenues and benefits, they've got a target of answering 60% of telephone calls within 20 seconds, and cumulatively their performance was 77% over 19-20. So that overachieved, that met and exceeded the target. Emails coming into the corporate email facility, inquiries at Bolsover. We've got a target of 100% to be acknowledged within 1 working day, and that was achieved. We've also got a target of achieving 100% response within 8 working days. 99% were answered within 8 working days in full. You'll see from the figures that actually we are receiving quite a lot of emails. It still remains a popular contact method, and so I think we are performing well to get 99%. Face-to-face monitoring, again with COVID-19, we were only able to do 1 monitoring period, but during that monitoring period, the target is 99%, and we achieved 99.9%. So again, that shows that we met and exceeded the target and demonstrates excellent customer service. During that same period in July where we did monitoring, and 199 callers were served on meet and greet at the Arking Clown. So that brings the total number of callers within that 1 week to 1,012. On Appendix 3A, it shows the amount of compliments that were received. Now, the number of compliments is different to the number of departmental compliments. So we may get a compliment for 3 or 4 different departments. So the numbers don't actually tally. So they don't actually correspond. But you'll see in the last 2 quarters, we received 218 written compliments. And you can see from the breakdown, the top performing ones were 44 compliments for leisure, 35 for street scene services, 35 for revenues and benefits, and 26 for housing. So again, it shows that we are providing really good customer service. I really think compliments, it takes quite a lot of people, quite a lot for somebody to put that into writing, and I think we should appreciate the amount of compliments we're receiving. Comments, we received 39, and all of them were acknowledged and passed on to the respective departments. Complaints, frontline resolution complaints. If you look at Appendix 3C, you'll see the amount of complaints, stage 1 complaints, which came through. And again, with that, you'll see that there is some slight slippage. Complaints, stage 1, should be responded to by the department within 3 working days. And you'll see that the percentage of achievement for that, actually there was a slight slippage on that from the previous year. Formal investigation complaints, 110 complaints were received during this period. 92% were responded to within our customer service standard, and that falls short of the target of 97%. And again, because of COVID-19, have it impacted on that availability of officers, etc. Internal review complaints during this period, 13 were received. Again, we didn't meet the target on that. 77% were responded to within the target period. But again, that was due to availability of officers and also availability of senior officers to be able to review those. Appendix 3F shows the status of Ombudsman complaints 2019-20 at the end of March 2020. During this period, 3 cases were received, and we got 1 decision of not upheld, no maladministration. 1 was commuted to internal review stage of the complaint process because complainants haven't fully completed the complaint process, and we were awaiting a decision in the 3rd. So you will see that when comparing 2019-20 to the previous year, there were more written compliments, we received fewer comments, we received fewer frontline complaints, we received more formal complaints and we received more internal review complaints. This would appear to show that we've got an easy to use complaint system. When looking at Ombudsman complaints decisions for the final financial year, it's satisfying to note that the Ombudsman closed 8 out of the 17 complaints after making initial inquiries. So they were satisfied with what the council had done. 5 complaints were not upheld or no administration or closed the case, which is the terminology that the Housing Ombudsman use. 2 were commuted to internal review stage as the complainants hadn't fully completed the internal complaints process. We did have 1 of maladministration of injustice, and we were awaiting, as I say, a decision on the final one. The upheld complaint, as I reported to Scrutiny in December 2019, was a particularly complex complaint, and the upheld bit was just a small proportion of that complaint. There are no real trends leading to service improvements during this financial year, but there were identified some issues about the new Bolsover project, but that is the subject of a scrutiny review, so I'm liaising with Scrutiny on that. Does anybody have any questions at all about the report?
Anybody? Yes, Patricia.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Clough, Althorpe Ward. Mine's not particularly a question. It's something that I want to refer to Rose. I note that on page 18, we've got an awful lot of compliments for that tutor. Can we, as a group, send forward something to that tutor to say we recognise how well she did?
Yeah, I don't see why we can't do that. Okay, thank you. Right, and in relation to stage 2 complaints, the cover report notes 110 complaints were received. This does not match the figures in the appendix of 201 for the period October to March. You allude to some complaints cutting across service areas, but there are no figures included for this. Can you clarify the correct figure, please? Both number of complaints and the percentage responded to in time, and how many do cross-cut?
Right, Chair, thank you for that. Yes, there are some complaints which cross-cut a number of different departments. So it may involve 3 or 4 different departments to a different degree. The ones which are out of timescale, if you look down the out of timescale column, that will be the departments that are involved in that particular complaint. So it may be that environmental health have not responded, but the other departments have. So I've not done a percentage on those apart from across the whole of it. Would you like that breaking down in future for sort of departments not responding? Is that would
yes please, that would be very helpful.
Future.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, Rita, you've got a question?
I have, yes. As COVID-19 only impacted the last 2 weeks of March, members were not expecting to see much impact on the data in this report. Correct figures aside, there were clearly some complaints that were not completed in the designated timescale. How many of these cross-cut more than one service area? Was it the case that only stage 2 complaints raised in March were impacted by COVID, or were some complaints which failed to meet timescale raised prior to COVID? Thank you.
Yeah, I can clarify on that. Yes, it would be complaints that had been received sorted towards the end of February as well, because it is a response time of 15 working days. So it would be the sort of ones that we received towards the end of February, and then when COVID impacted and we had a lot of people working from home, etc. It was that, so where we got officers being deployed to other services and other people just not being available because they've been displaying symptoms, etc. So I think there's quite there's quite a chunk of those until we got the working arrangements put in place.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In relation to stage 3 complaints, again, when did the complaints failing to meet target initially come to the council? Was it in March? Would we not have expected much of an impact from COVID? Also, how over target of the 20-day response time were these complaints on completion?
Yeah, yes, thank you for that question again, Chair. Again, it would be the complaints that came in towards the end of February. So they've got a response time of 20 working days. So that would again be impacted on for the response time sort of in March. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second question.
How over target of the 20-day response time were these complaints on completion?
Right, yes. I think what would be useful to look at, and I'm just refer back to the report. I've not got the figures for the ones that's gone over, but if you look at where the table is under stage 1 complaints, just let me have a look. Yeah, if you look at the volume by performance, just trying to find where it is. We do have an average, and you can see that the average has dropped. Yeah, if you look under compliments, comments and complaints within the initial report, stage 2 complaints, the average response time had dropped down from 11 last year working days to 13, and stage 3 complaints had dropped down the average from 16 working days to 19. So it was very few that actually went over, and not by much. I think off the top of my head, it was 22 working days. Because the figures are so low with stage 3 complaints, again, just one being out of time would impact on that. And yeah, if you look within the report again, during this period, 13 stage 3 complaints received and 10 were responded to within 20 working days. So just 3 complaints going slightly over the 20 working days has impacted on that figure. But again, I am sort of monitoring this, and we've now got things in place, obviously, to monitor this, and it is now running more smoothly again. But if we do have a problem, I can report on how long they are going over.
Right, thank you.
Does that answer your question? Sorry.
It does. Very long-winded, yes.
Sorry.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Anne Clark has a question. She has a hand raised.
Okay, Anne, would you like to come in?
Yes, it's just a query really. When as a councillor, we put in we send an email with concerns, complaints, and and that on that email there are multiple. We're not set. We're perhaps sending on complaints from, say, 10 different ward members. Is that email counted as one complaint, or would it be counted as 10? And I mean, we have itemised them within the email. You know, how they're counted, because I know regarding street scene, multiple complaints have been sent in via members, and the number of complaints don't tally. So are they counted as one, or should we send in an email for every single complaint that we get, rather than send in one for 10 people?
Right, I can answer that. I mean, from a perspective of sort of complaints, if they're just a service request, they generally go through a contact centre. But I would prefer, if you've got a formal complaint, it is just one complaint. However, for reporting purposes, I will count that as a complaint against each department. So if we've got, say, a complaint that is about street scene services and includes environmental health, that will get recorded as a street scene service complaint and an environmental health. But for efficiency's sake, if you send it through to me, it is counted as one in the overall figures, one complaint, but and it will be responded to as one complaint. But for this reporting purposes, it will be recorded as a complaint against each department that it involves.
Okay, does that answer your query, Anne?
Well, it doesn't. It just gives a slewed number, because we've had lots of issues and they are complaints and not service issues, and they have gone on one email, but there's been multiple complaints on that one email. So it's not just one complaint, and it's right across the whole of Bolsover district. That before I went away, there were several of us were sending in these complaints. So it concerns me then that perhaps it's only counted as 4 complaints, when in fact there could have actually been in excess of 40 complaints from residents.
Would it be possible for you to take that up with the officer, Anne?
Yeah, I mean, Nick, as portfolio holder, he's already doing that, but yeah, I will tell him.
Okay, thank you. Rita, you've got a question?
Right. And finally, in Appendix 1, has a gap in data for question 4. Did monitoring not take place in the early part of question 4? Could this not have been partially reported?
I'm sorry, which parts of that? The
Appendix 1.
Yeah.
Gap in data for question 4. Did monitoring not take place in the early part of question 4? Could this not have been reported?
Which part? Is it the face-to-face standards that you refer to, Councillor Bowler?
It's not Bowler.
It's Councillor Turner that's asking.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Turner, sorry. Is it the face-to-face monitoring you're referring to, Councillor Turner?
If I could just interject, it is, yes, that the table where there's this sort of a greyed out box. There were 2 greyed out boxes. I think it's on page 16 of the papers.
Yes, again, that is, I think I can answer that, yeah. We did 2 periods of monitoring, generally speaking, for face-to-face, and we'd got one scheduled for sort of February, March, and obviously because of COVID, we didn't take part. The greyed out ones are the periods that we don't do monitoring. So we should have been doing the monitoring between January and March. That when it was scheduled in. So the greyed out boxes are the ones where we don't do any monitoring.
Right,
Okay.
right, okay.
Right. In relation to stage 3 complaints, how are these now dealt with following the departure of the CEO? Who acts the final point of contact and signatory?
Yes, we, as you're aware, we did actually do a mini review on the complaint system, and I've got a new complaint system, and we updated at the same time, and you'll be aware that we updated the policy and procedure. And because we no longer have a CEO across both authorities, this is now delegated down to the directors. So the directors actually do the internal review. So that's Lee Hickin, Karen Hansen and Grant Galloway, and also the monitoring officer, because she has a role within the complaints process and ombudsman complaints. So it is either one of those 4 now that does the internal review.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Tricia.
Thank you, Councillor Clough. I'll talk no word. Just to ask the person then, the director who's dealing with the complaint, I'm assuming that they wouldn't handle a complaint that relates to something that they oversee. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. Usually, any one of the directors can do the internal review. They've got the skill set to be able to do an internal review for any part of the council. Generally speaking, the complaint system, the first stage is the department responds to the customer, and if they're not happy with that response, after 3 working days, if they want to make a formal complaint, then that falls to the complaints contacts to deal with the managers. So the escalation is then it can be any one of the directors to review that complaint, and it could be their service area or it could be another service area.
Okay.
But if that director was part of the complaint, would he or she still be following that through?
No, I wouldn't. If the director was part of that complaint, I would give it to another director to do the internal review. And I think you've got to have that degree of separation, haven't you?
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. That's all I needed to know.
Okay, thank you. In relation to the summary for 2019-20 on page 13 of the report, we note there has been more written complaints, which goes against our aim to generally encourage more digital transactions where possible. We also note that there have been more stage 2 and stage 3 complaints, which require greater investigation. While we acknowledge that this shows the complaint system is accessible at the higher stages, is this an indication that customer standards are not being met in certain areas?
Right. This is I think it's a double-edged sword. The Ombudsman is now recognising that the performance of a council isn't the volume of complaints isn't an indicator of how poorly a council is performing. It is about the justified complaints. So if we look at the volume in isolation, it does look like we're receiving more complaints. But if we look at, say, how many are justified or partially justified, the Ombudsman is more keen on looking at that and service improvements that follow on from that. So if we look at something, and even if it's only partially justified, if we service improvement in place so that that doesn't happen again. I think that's a better indicator of the complaints process rather than just by volume itself. The Ombudsman does look at authorities that don't have many complaints, and it's whether or not they are downgrading complaints or refusing to accept complaints. So if we've got an open complaint system and we deal with them, that's a better indicator, I think.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else got any questions? Is anybody indicating, Tom?
Nobody's indicating, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. In that then, I would like to move the recommendations at point 6 within the report on page 14 of the papers. Can I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Turner, second.
Thank you. Are you all in favour of that?
Yeah.
Please show your hands. Okay, Tom. Is everybody in favour?
I think that's all in favour, Chair, although there's somebody in the... Yeah, that's everybody in favour, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. And thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Right, agenda item 7 then, annual letter from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman 2019-20. We now have the annual Ombudsman report. If I could pass over to Anne again.
Hello, thank you. Again, this is the annual letter and my report on the annual letter from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, and it's to provide you with information. The document contains an annual summary of statistics on complaints made about this authority for the financial year ending 31st of March 2020. Again, you will see that the numbers that the Ombudsman report back on does not align with the report that I've just presented to you about the number of complaints. This is because their numbers do contain complaints that they may have referred back to the customer and advised them to come to the council in the first instance. It also, they may not choose to pursue that complaint. Their statistics will also include decisions that may refer to a complaint from the previous year, but they've made a decision on it during this year. The annual letter has, we've got an appendix 1, which includes complaints received, complaints decided, and compliance with their recommendations. And they've presented this in a slightly different way than they usually do. Key points from the information is that the Local Government Ombudsman received 11 enquiries and complaints during the previous year, and 4 of those were subject to a detailed investigation. The Government Ombudsman decided on 16 complaints, and 2 of those were incomplete or invalid, so they will have referred back to the complainants. 8 were closed after initial inquiries, so again that shows that we have done what we should have done. So the Ombudsman was satisfied with our actions. 2 were referred back to us as premature complaints, so we had to complete the complaint process. And 3 were no maladministration. Again, as the previous report showed, there was 1 of maladministration and injustice. And again, it was reported to yourselves in December 2019, and I explained it was quite a complex complaint. If you look at the benchmarking information, I did it at nearest neighbour, and obviously they're very close neighbouring authorities similar to our own, and I've put some comparative figures in there. 1 complaint again was upheld against this council, and that is they've showed that as a 25% of maladministration out of the 4. You have to bear in mind that there were only 4 detailed investigations, so 1 will make high impact on that overall figure. By way of background information, the local government ombudsman upheld 61% of complaints submitted to them in 2019-20, and that is up from 58% from the previous year. And the average for the similar authorities is 45% upheld. So again, it is quite low against that sort of background. I have done, the report does include information about complaints received through the Housing Ombudsman again, because obviously that's a slightly different process, slightly different investigations. We had 1 complaint come in via the Housing Ombudsman, and it came in as a complaint, and they also did a review. The Housing Ombudsman did a review. In both cases, the decision was to close the case and there was no maladministration. Does anybody have any questions about the annual letter or the report?
Yes, Tricia.
Hello, Councillor Clough, Althocknell Ward. In the final paragraph, the local government ombudsman refers to courses and training, and they trained more than 1,400 people. I just wonder, from Bolsover District's point of view, how many of our staff have actually attended relevant courses to improve their skills?
Thank you, Councillor Clough. I attend every training course and have done every year, and their seminars. I just think it's quite important to keep aligned with the Ombudsman and their direction of travel. Sometimes they've got new things coming through, including complaints. They've included how complaints about elected members are looked at, not the complaint itself, but how those are looked at and whether they've been dealt with correctly. So things that are new, that are upcoming, I like to be a part of. We did in 2018 planning, the planning departments and neighbouring planning departments. We hosted a planning ombudsman session at Bolsover, so the planning could see where the ombudsman dealt with planning complaints, because obviously the decision in a planning decision doesn't come under their complaints process, but how that is administered does. And they are doing now some online courses, and I'm pulling together how many offices from this council and North East to do an online session. So if there are sessions available, I try to get as many people on them as possible. Does that answer your question, Councillor Clough?
It certainly does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions or comments? No? In that case, then, I would like to move the recommendations at point 6 within the report on page 26 of the papers. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it, Councillor Josbury.
Thank you. All those in favour, raise your hands, please.
That's everybody, Chair.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you for presenting, Anne, and you are now free to leave the meeting.
Chair, Councillor Mary Dooley also leaving the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Right, agenda item 8 then, work programme 2020 to 21. We shall now consider our work programme for the coming year. I'll pass over to the Scrutiny Officer to represent the report. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you, Chair. So if I could ask members to look at the appendix. Looking towards the October meeting, I've got a couple of items that are still provisional at this stage. I'm just waiting for confirmation from officers as to whether the reports will be available for that meeting. I'm hoping to give you a final update on our review looking at the Standards Committee. There were a couple of recommendations outstanding from that. That was originally due to come back probably sort of June, July time, but obviously with the shutdown and pandemic, that wasn't possible. I'm hoping that's now complete. I'm also waiting for confirmation that we can get an update from Matt Broughton in relation to the transformation programme. That's going through some slight revisions currently, obviously to take account of sort of changing working practices as a result of the pandemic, trying to streamline a little in terms of what is the primary focus, given current financial situation and what we've got in terms of resources. I'm waiting for that to go through some final considerations with the portfolio holder before we know for definite if that's coming back at the next meeting. So I'll keep you posted on that. We've also got the communications manager attending to talk to us about the revamp of the website. That's due to go live this month and it's going through its final changes at this point. And there will be an update as requested by members on the impact of COVID-19 on customer services and the contact centres, and that's confirmed. Looking ahead to November, like I say, I'm hoping that we'll get the update on the review we did against environmental health and licensing service. So as you saw from the list of key decisions, there's another report going to exec this month around the structure of the service and how that's currently working. So I'm hoping that'll have gone through its final changes so that we can get an update in November. We do have Anne in attendance again in December with the half-yearly report for Q1, Q2 on complaints, and we also have Q2 performance, and then following that after Christmas a further 2 performance reports. I don't know if there's anything else that members wish to request at this stage in terms of additional reports, or if there's anything that members wish to query.
Has anybody got anything? No? Okay, thank you, Jo.
Okay, so it's just to move the recommendation, Chair, on the report.
Right, I would like to move the recommendations at point 6 within the report on page 36 of your papers. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair, Ray Heffer.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Are you all in favour?
Yeah.
All in favour, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Right, can I thank members and officers for their attendance today? That now concludes the business of the meeting, and I shall close the meeting and ask for the live stream to be ended. To the public with us on YouTube, thank you for watching. But could I also please remind members to stay connected so that we can continue with our informal meeting?